Hello and welcome once again to the Cine-Files, where each week we enter the world of a great film, we explore its themes, the history, the filmmaking, and the influence it has on us today. My name is Steve Morris. I'm a filmmaker and directing instructor in Los Angeles, California.
Hello, everyone. My name is John Roca. I'm a voiceover artist, host, producer, and writer over at Collider and Collider.com. Co-host of the Top 10 Show, co-host of the Geek Buddies, and a proud co-host of the Cine-Files. And I'm excited for this movie today. We're going to talk about, Steve, this is one you suggested, which I haven't thought about in years.
This is our oldest film. We are going back to a movie. This movie is 93 years old. 1926, Buster Keaton, The General. It is our first official silent film. We did Modern Times. But Modern Times is like a half silent film because there is sync sound in it. There's no dialogue. So it's, it was Charlie Chaplin's way of, dangling his toes in the water sound without doing full sound. But this is a full silent film from the silent era. Do you remember how you first came to it?
I would say it was probably many, many years ago when I was going through these. Like, you've got to see these silent films to be considered a cinephile, right? I'd gone through the Chaplin stuff. Keaton was always kind of the person that didn't quite get to the Chaplin level. And I always had a hard time with Keaton because I'm a Harold Lloyd, Charlie Chaplin guy.
Right.
If I'm going to watch a silent film, I wanted to have a little more charm and personality. And as much as I enjoy Buster Keaton, the hangdog face keeps me from fully feeling a joy or a fun during his movies.
He was known as Old Stoneface. That was his nickname.
I wasn't always the one that ran to it, but I remember watching this one in Steamboat, whatever his
Steamboat Bill Jr.
Steamboat Bill Jr., and I was like, these are incredible. So I think it was back in the maybe late 90s when I was there at Florida State and probably rented it from the library there and watched it.
So for me, I think I'd watched a couple of shorts, and just like you, I had watched some Charlie Chaplin because he's the guy you hear about first.
Yeah, of course. And
I'd seen a tiny bit of Harold Lloyd, and then I was in film school, and in my film history class, which, by the way, I, to this day, am still using things I learned in that class 20-something years ago and use them frequently on the Cine-Files. Yeah. We watched Seven Chances, which is a fantastic movie, fantastic Buster Keaton movie. And then, the silent movie theater that's on Fairfax.
Yes, that used to be there.
It used to be there. So this was a place where they just showed silent films. And only in Los Angeles could there be a movie theater which was just devoted to silent films. And one day when I was still in film school, it's probably 95 or 96, they showed The General, and Karen and I went to see it, and I remember sitting in like the fourth row of that little theater with that square screen because that's the aspect ratio of the time, and watching The General, and it was so cool to see it in a big audience because how often do you have a chance for that? And just everybody laughing along with this movie.
Yeah.
And I want to go into, it was our first time talking about Buster Keaton. I'd like to give a little bit of history just because he's a really interesting guy. So first of all, he's born in 1896. He's named Joseph after his dad, and his was a family of vaudevillians. And it sounds like this is the 1870s, 1880s, 1890s that they were a traveling family of vaudevillians. And it sounds like this is the time when it's really even pre-vaudeville. They sold patent medicines. They rolled into town. They did shows. And for those of you who don't know patent medicines, this is like here's the elixir that will cure your baldness, sir, and you, sir, and you, sir. Do you have some ague in the morning? Feeling a little dropsy? Whatever, like weird stuff. And here was the stuff they were selling. Right. And one of the people they were traveling with was a little-known magician named Harry Houdini. Oh. It was the Houdini and the Keatons traveling around doing shows in the 1890s. And Buster Keaton was born and at the store. This could be totally apocryphal, sure. But that at 18 months or maybe 6 months, based on other stories, he fell down an entire flight of stairs, was entirely unhurt, jumped up, and the friend that was with him said, that kid's a real Buster.
And that's how he got his name?
And that's how he got his name. There's another story that said it was actually Harry Houdini who gave him that name.
I wouldn't be surprised by that.
I mean, and who knows? But they certainly were traveling with Houdini. And Buster joined the show when he was 3 years old, so 1899. And what they did, and I'm telling you, this is the truth, is he would sass his dad, and his dad would throw him through the scenery.
Wow.
Or throw him into the orchestra pit. Or throw him into the audience. In fact, they threw him around so much that they actually sewed the handle of a suitcase onto his clothing to make it easier to throw him far. And they were frequently arrested for child abuse until Buster would take off his shirt and say there are no bruises, no broken bones. He became just an instant expert at falling, a skill which he says saved his life many, many times. Wow. Like his method of being able to be relaxed, which I know from doing martial arts, and go limp and be loose and not take those impacts. He was billed, they would go to towns and put the poster up, and he was billed as the little boy who can't be damaged. It's weird, right?
Yeah.
You're feeling a little strange about this story.
You want to talk about child labor?
Right. Well, that's what actually they got arrested several times when the child labor laws changed.
Of course.
And they forced Buster, like they go to New York, they get arrested. Buster Keaton is forced to go to school. He goes to school one day and then they skip town.
Oh.
So he basically never went to school. He was just a traveling performer.
Yeah.
He served in the military in World War I. And they come to Hollywood, and he starts to find out about movies. And now he's, in his 20s. And he starts working for Joseph M. Schenck, who's not, is one of the producers. He's not like the biggest ones like
Like Shrek.
Yeah.
Oh, no, not Shrek. I'm sorry. Max Sennett.
Max Sennett. That's the one I couldn't remember. Right. And the person he ends up starting to work for is Fatty Arbuckle.
Oh.
He becomes a gag man. A gag man is a person who writes jokes, and it's not word jokes. It's physical, visual jokes because we're in the silent era. Right. And he became sort of the second banana to Fatty Arbuckle for a whole bunch of shorts, 14 shorts into the 20s. When Fatty Arbuckle, for those of you who don't know, he's another few tiers down. Like if you go Chaplin, Harold Lloyd, Buster Keaton, Laurel and Hardy, and now you get to Langdon and Fatty Arbuckle. And Fatty Arbuckle was accused of murdering a woman, and the people who stood by him were Charlie Chaplin and Buster Keaton and a few other people. And he was in his first feature film with Douglas Fairbanks, and now he starts to get hired to do his own two-reel comedies, which become a huge hit. Two-reel means how many reels of film, so it's like a 20-minute movie. And they're really good, by the way. Watch, things like 1 Week, The Playhouse, Electric House. These are funny, brilliant comedies, well worth watching. And he goes into feature films where he had complete artistic control. Like Chaplin, he was the writer, he was the director, he thought up all these gags, and he became a huge stuntman. And we mentioned Steamboat Bill Jr., Seven Chances, and The General, which he believes is his greatest film, is made in 1926, and that brings us up to today.
Oh, okay.
I mean, not up to today.
Right.
It brings us up to where the movie we're talking about today.
Yeah.
Just a little bit of pre-production. This is actually based on a true story.
Yes.
It is the great locomotive chase. And yet, here's the weird thing. This is a story in which Union Army, as heroes, go down, steal a locomotive named the General, bring it back up to the north, destroying trains and train tracks and telegraph wires and burning stuff, and fought several battles to finally meet up with the Northern Army. The guys who did this, several of them won the Congressional Medal of Honor. These guys were heroes. Keaton looks at this, and I don't know if this is true, but this is what I read. He looks at this story and he says, I don't know if people would really root for the Union Army.
Right.
So I'm going to switch it to I'm going to switch the heroes to be the Confederates.
Yeah, or vice versa. He said, I don't think people would see the Confederates as villains.
Yeah.
And so that's an interesting thing at the time. 1926.
Right.
What's the mood of the country in 1926 for this? To see if the Confederate, were they, this is after, obviously, what is it? The
Birth of the Nation is 1916, 14, something like that.
But also the Reconstruction of the South. So maybe they're saying, they're still reevaluating what happened and healing the wounds.
It's a weird thing.
It's an interesting time, yeah.
Well, I watched it with my kid, and I had to explain to them. He's like, is those the bad guys? And I'm like, in this film.
Yeah, in this film, they're the bad guys. They're not really the bad guys.
I wouldn't feel that they were the bad guys.
But why does he want to make the Union the bad guys? That's interesting, too. Was he a Confederate sympathizer?
I couldn't find any information on this at all.
Very interesting.
He tried to actually get the actual general that had been used in the actual raid by the Union troops, but it was being preserved. They shot this whole thing up in Oregon. They used actual vintage trains. When they went to shoot up there, they had 18 freight cars of materials. They had cannon, costumes, houses, covered wagons. All of it they took up from L.A. up to Oregon to shoot this film in a small town called Cottage Grove. Yeah. And they hired 1,500 locals to work on this movie. There were 3,000 people on the payroll. The budget was somewhere around $750,000.
Which in 1926 money.
This is one of the biggest films of all time. It's not quite like an Intolerance level, which is D.W. Griffin's, which I've never been able to watch. I've watched parts of it. A huge, huge film. But it's not quite at that level, but this is a huge, huge, massive film. Yeah. One thing I should say is, guess what, folks? This is a silent film.
Yeah.
If you haven't watched a silent film, it's silent. And not silent in that it doesn't have music, because there will be music, but there are no sound effects, there's no Foley, there's no dialogue. This is all done silently. And if you were to go to see this in a theater, you would see it accompanied by a live musician.
Yeah. So we're going to do this silently for the next 90 minutes with just music playing underneath what we're thinking.
Yeah. I did. Now would you like to get into it?
Yeah, let's do this.
So we start off, we see the Western Flyer going into Georgia. The year is 1861. We see the train. Buster Keaton's driving the train. The train is called the General. Now we know the meaning of the title.
Right.
He checks his time, and he gets into this small town, which is again shot in Cottage Grove in Oregon. It's supposed to be a southern town, and there are kids there to welcome the train, and he kind of looks at the kids. And what we see on the title cards, because this has title cards to tell us information, is there are two things that this guy loves. He loves the train, and he loves this girl.
Yeah.
And we see a picture of him with the train and a picture of the girl.
Yeah, Annabelle.
And then we see her. We see Annabelle, and he is walking with the kids, and they're walking in step. And the music is on the beat, and they're walking along, and Annabelle sees them, and she falls in line behind them. He walks up to her door. He checks his hair. He checks his face. He checks his clothes, not realizing the girl that he loves is right behind him. Then he sees her. And we go inside, and I love the kids go inside with him.
Yeah.
And he wants to obviously propose. And what's so great about this movie is the storytelling is fantastic.
Yeah.
Even though you don't hear dialogue, there's never a moment where you don't know what's going on. He can't propose with those kids there. So he gets up, he puts on his hat, they put on their hats, he starts walking towards the door, they start walking towards the door, he opens the door, they go through the door, he closes the door with them on the outside and turns back to her. And just as he's about to propose, in comes Dad with the news that Fort Sumter has been attacked. And we hear Dixie play. And they're all going to go enlist. Yeah. She asks if he's going to go enlist. Of course he's going to go enlist. And we're going to go off to enlist in the Confederate Army.
Well, he's almost, it looks like he's almost reluctant to enlist, right? Because Dad goes and enlists. Her brother goes and enlists. Which I thought initially, because I hadn't seen it in a long time, I thought might be a rival suitor for her hand.
That's what I thought too.
But it's actually her brother.
Yeah.
But he is almost like, he didn't even think about enlisting, right? That wasn't his first thought as soon as Dad came in with the news to run away. It's only when she sees him sitting on the couch, everyone else has run out to go enlist, and she says, "Aren't you going to enlist?" And he's like, yes, I'll go enlist. I love you. I'll do whatever you need me to do for you to be in love with me, boom, and goes off. Yeah.
Well, what's interesting about his character throughout is he is not active. He is reactive. Is that he never chooses to do a thing, but when a thing needs doing, he does it.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So she says it doesn't occur to him to enlist, and she goes, "You gonna go enlist?" Yeah. Yeah, I am.
Which is the stupid thing you do for love. You always do stupid things for love. Yeah.
Well, it's not going to work out because he's going to have a lot of problems. He runs, sneaks his way into line, and what we'll see throughout this whole movie is these little tiny bits.
Yeah.
It's not just that he gets in line. It's how he gets in line. He slides into line super fast, and it's just the little touches that are so much fun. He goes up to the enlistment officer, and by the way, the whole town is coming out to enlist. Yeah. Everyone's ready to go fight against the Union.
This is not how it was, but okay.
Well, actually, you know what? In our Civil War documentary, it's not like a lot of Confederate people didn't sign up to enlist right away. Yeah, I mean,
you think they all ran out of towns to go enlist? To go fight?
I don't think they did it quite like in this movie. But there was it was a very romantic cause at the beginning of that war.
Yeah, before they knew what it was.
Before they knew what was going to happen to them. Yeah. And by the way, this movie is not going to touch on
any of that
at all. Right. He goes up to the enlistment guy. He says his name is Johnny Gray, which is like, it's half Johnny Reb and it's half the color of the Confederate uniform.
Oh, good point.
And the guy says, "Well, what's your occupation?" And he says, "I'm the engineer of the train." And the guy goes, "Oh." He goes to talk to his boss. His boss says, "No, we need him to be running the train." So they say denied. But they don't tell him why he's denied.
Which is interesting, yeah. But of course it works for the narrative of the film.
Well, it works for the next 3 bits that we're going to see. So he walks out, sees the next guy. He gets the slip to be in the Army. And that guy's kind of big and strong and strapping. So he goes, "Oh, I'm kind of small. So maybe that's why." And then up comes a person who is exactly his height and build, who also got a slip. And he goes, oh, well, what's that about? And then he goes, oh, I got an idea. I'm going to pretend to be someone else. So he goes back, he sneaks back in line, goes up to the guy, says he's a bartender. The guy recognizes, nope, that's not going to work. And then we get another bit where someone holds out a little slip for the next person who's distracted talking to their neighbor, and he takes the slip.
Yeah.
Because he's going to steal his way into the army. No, that doesn't work. He gets kicked out as well. And now outside, who does he see but the brother and the dad of the woman he loves?
Yeah.
And they go, hey, come on in line with us.
Right.
And he says no, which they interpret as his cowardice.
Yep.
He doesn't want to join the army. Of course, that's not true because he doesn't explain what's happening. Right. And we end up back at the train. And he sits down on, I don't know what it's called, but the metal beam between the wheels.
Yeah.
And up comes Annabelle, and she talks to her family, and they say, oh, he wouldn't even get in line.
Yeah.
And she's like, what? Oh, my. And she comes over to him and tells him he's a disgrace to the South.
And says, I don't want to see you again unless you're in uniform.
Yep. She walks out, and he sits back on, again, that bar between those wheels, and the train starts moving, and he goes up and down perfectly with the thing.
Before I ever saw this movie, I remember seeing that clip, right? If you're any lover of film, whenever you see montages of great films, and certainly in the Oscars growing up in the 80s and 90s, they did that, you would see this sequence. Because it's such a brilliantly shot sequence and believable with how it's rolling around like that and him go. It's such a brilliant idea.
Well, and let's take a step because it looks so perfect.
Yeah.
And he is motionless. Part of what sells the gag is that he has no reaction to this thing moving at all. Yeah. He is perfectly balanced. He doesn't lean forward. He doesn't lean back. He doesn't, jerk at all when this thing starts going. Yeah. And he moves perfectly off. So first of all, that degree of difficulty is super hard to make something look so simple and perfect.
Yeah.
The other thing to keep in mind is these are real trains.
Yes.
They're not just real trains. They are real Civil War era trains. They're not replicas. They are trains that are 60 years old with Civil War technology. Those are big, powerful steam boilers, huge, heavy wheels. If he is an inch off, those things cut him right in half.
Yeah.
I mean, it doesn't look like a dangerous stunt. Right. It is really dangerous.
Makes you wonder how you go about preparing a stunt like this.
Watch this film. Yeah. So you're going to watch this film, and you're going to get just swept up in how enjoyable it is. It's really enjoyable.
Sure.
And then, for our Cine-Files fans out there, watch it again and think about how did they do this?
Yeah.
And remember that the only things they're using is real trains.
Yeah.
Like when they're throwing wood in that fire to make that train go, that's what's making the train go.
Right.
So you literally have to stoke a fire to get the vehicle up to speed.
Also, the timing of these things.
All of it.
Incredible, yeah.
And the camera work is one of the really interesting things about film is that film reached to some degree an artistic peak in the 20s because film is literally invented in the late 1800s. And then really it's The Great Train Robbery, which is Edwin S. Porter's film in 1905, which is the first real film where they actually use editing and some of the techniques that become to be established of how you actually do this. And then you get Birth of a Nation, which is not a film we're ever doing on the Cine-Files, but is an extremely important film in terms of film history and technique. By the time you get to the mid-20s, the silent movie art form had reached a kind of peak. They'd really figured out how to do this. And then when sound comes in, it fucks all that up.
Yeah.
Because instead of having these relatively small cameras that you could move around easily, you had these huge cameras that were super noisy and these microphones, and it just, you go into what we see in Singing in the Rain.
Right.
And all that great technique and camera movement and all that stuff they'd figure out, they had to throw out the window because the cameras couldn't move anymore. Everything was dealing with sound constantly and recording constantly, and you see that the films of the 30s are much simplified in compared to the films of the 20s.
Yeah.
Anyway, it's a year later, and we're at a Union camp in Chattanooga, and now we meet our bad guys, and we find out the bad guy plan, which is these evil Union spies are going to go south. They're going to steal a train, do exactly what actually happened, which is tear up all the rails, just do a whole bunch of destruction, and bring it back to the Union Army.
Yeah.
And they go, great. It's a great plan. And part of their plan is that they're going to steal the train when they stop at somewhere called shanty, big shanty.
Big shanty for dinner.
For dinner.
20 minutes.
Yeah, all the passengers are going to get out.
Is it a buffet, Steve? Like, how do all those passengers get out and eat in 20 minutes and get back on the train in 20 minutes?
Here's what I think. So have you ever had this?
What?
Like this situation?
No.
Okay. When I was a kid, the greatest trip of my childhood was we went to Alaska when I was 9 years old. And we went, at one point, I think we took a train through the Yukon in Canada.
Oh, nice.
Like an old narrow gauge, kind of old-fashioned railroad. And we had exactly this. Get off the train, you have 20 minutes for lunch or dinner or whatever, and then you get back on the train. Wow. And it was big bowls of chili or something. Oh. So I bet it was big bowls of stew.
Right.
You know, something like, here's stew, here's some soft tack and some vegetables or something, and then
already lined up.
All lined up. Yeah. Anyway, but we digress.
Yeah, well,
but that is my guess.
I just wanted to know. Yeah.
So everyone gets off the train, and we see that, Annabelle, she's on the train.
Right.
And we've also seen, by the way, that she's seen her brother who's wounded, and we hear that Dad has also been wounded in the war.
And she sees Johnny.
Oh, that's right. She does see Johnny because, of course, he's running the train.
He is, and he's ashamed when he sees her, too, because they see each other from a distance, and he just gets back into that caboose all resigned.
And everyone gets off the train. All the bad guys get off the train, but they get off on the other side.
Yeah.
And then Annabelle, I guess she forgets something, heads back to the train, goes into the baggage car. They grab her, bad guys do, tie her up. And they've uncoupled the train. That engine starts to pull away. And, of course, Johnny sees it, and some of the other guys who work the train see it, and they all take off running. And Johnny keeps running.
Yeah, which is pretty incredible.
Every time I watch him move, it's just fun.
I just wonder if the way they make that effect work is that everyone else is running a little bit slower than he is, so it makes it look like he's really fast. Like Chaplin did that, too. Yeah. Like, it's amazing how fast these lead actors are in their films, but it could be because everyone else is running a little bit slower to make it look like they're fast.
Bad guys are cutting some telegraph lines.
Yeah.
And Buster Keaton gets a hand car. And it doesn't get it going the right way, then does get it going the right way. And the bad guys are busting up the tracks.
Yeah.
And they've wrecked some rail, and Buster Keaton goes right into where it's wrecked. He goes off the rails. The hand cart goes down into the river. Now what? Now what is he going to do?
Right.
Sees a dude with an old-fashioned bike. The ricketiest looking wooden, weird, big wheel bike possible. And again, this shot lasts, 2 seconds.
Yeah.
Watch Buster Keaton jump on this bike and ride off.
It's incredible.
Amazing.
I don't know how you don't bust your balls literally doing what he did.
Well, and it's like he leaps on the bike from behind and is immediately pedaling.
Yes.
His feet find those pedals. And this is the thing. So one of the big fans of Buster Keaton is Jackie Chan. Jackie Chan is a huge Buster Keaton fan.
That makes so much
sense. And if you look at things that Buster Keaton does, which is he goes, well, I want to do this thing with the bike. And it's like I said, 2 seconds maybe on screen. Maybe it's 50 takes. Who knows how many takes it took for him to do this thing? And Jackie Chan, it's all the time. I want to flip this pen from one hand and catch it in this cup while doing this other thing with my foot. Right. 90 takes later, he gets it.
Yeah.
And it's literally like, I'm going to give you a 2-second little bit of pleasure that you won't even pay that much attention to, but that's the perfectionism, And then he crashes that bike. Then he gets to the next town, and there's some soldiers, and there's a train. And he says, hey, some bad guys captured my general. Which, of course, they're going, they think it's a human.
Yeah, right.
And so they rally the troops, and they get on the train, and he gets in the engine, and he takes off, and it's not connected to the...
Which I love. And I love seeing the Confederate soldiers waving and yelling
like,
at him.
Hey!
You're leaving us behind, you idiot! Yeah.
And, of course, it takes him a long time to realize that actually he's not pulling anything.
Has the smartest guy, Johnny. Let's be real.
No, he's always looking forward.
Yeah, he's a sweetheart of a guy, but he's always looking forward.
Yeah.
Yes.
Well, and he has one of the greatest skills that any hero could ever have: luck.
Yes, true.
He gets luck and determination.
Yes.
He's not going to quit.
Nope.
The bad guys are watering their train, and he ends up going through the water, which we're going to see happen in reverse later on in the film. And the bad guys look back and see that they're being followed, but they assume there must be a bunch of guys. So they don't want to fight him. They don't know it's just one dude coming after them. And then we see a thing that we're going to see throughout this whole thing, which is Buster Keaton running back and forth on the top of the moving train while it's going.
It's incredible.
And again, folks, There's nothing fake here.
Don't try this at home.
This is a real Civil War era train going 40 miles an hour along the tracks, and he is running back and forth on it like it's nothing.
Once again, you got to wonder how many takes.
How many takes?
How many times did he fall down or fall off?
Yeah.
Or stop himself or stumble. It's just crazy.
Well, and to do it too, there has to be a road alongside the train tracks with a car going 40 miles an hour to do the tracking shot.
Yeah.
And
Right,
and
good
again,
point.
this is a 1926 truck that's doing this too. And the shots are beautiful. And I'm telling you, the Blu-ray restoration, it looks fantastic. I've never seen a film of this era look this good. It looks just fantastic.
I found a streaming version in HD. You're right, Steve. It's beautiful.
Yeah. He finds a big cannon.
Right.
Luckily, on a cart to attach to the back of his engine, which he does.
Right.
And so now while the train is going and he's not running it, which I guess, it's a train. It's on tracks. It's not like it's going to go the wrong way, although later on things like that happen.
Yeah.
But he goes, I'm going to fire this cannon at the car in front of me. Right. So he gets some gunpowder. He puts it in the cannon. He gets the cannonball. He puts it into the ramrod, the wadding, the whole thing, just like you're supposed to. Here's my understanding, and again, I don't know if I'm right about this. It's a real cannon fired with real gunpowder.
Yeah.
There isn't a way to fake this at this time. This is my understanding.
Yeah.
So he actually, and it's all in one shot. So he actually is holding real gunpowder and puts it in for the cannon to fire.
Right.
And what happens is he didn't put enough gunpowder in, and so the cannonball just kind of does a small lazy arc landing in the engine.
Yeah.
Which he then pushes off and it later explodes. So now he's going to fire again. I didn't put enough gunpowder in the first time. I'll put all the gunpowder in the second time. Puts it in, lights the fuse, goes forward. Now he's in front of the cannon, which is aimed up.
Yeah.
He climbs onto the engine. His foot gets caught on something.
Right.
His foot gets caught on the cart that's holding the cannon in place, I believe. And it starts to separate. And again, we're going, oh my God, how's he going to get out of this?
Yeah.
Gets his foot free. And now the cannon aims down and is aimed directly at him. At first, he doesn't know that this cannon with extra gunpowder is aimed directly at him. And now the bad guys on the train in front, they've all lined up. They got their rifles out, and they're ready to open fire at him.
Yeah.
And the cannon does fire, but it fires right when we get to a curve in the track. And so instead of hitting him, it almost hits the bad guys. I can't even imagine the complexity of setting up that shot.
Yeah.
You've got the cannon fire and the explosion. You've got two trains running on curved tracks. You need the cannon fire to happen just as the track curves, so it's aimed in the right direction, and the explosion to happen in the right timing. Man, that's hard. With, again, 1860s era engines.
Yeah.
Amazing, the technology here. So the bad guys have decided to cut loose one of their cars. And that car is heading straight back towards Buster Keaton, who's now down on the cow. What's it called? The cow cutter? The thing that's in the front of the train.
Oh, yeah.
It's a cow cutter, cow something.
Sounds good.
And it literally was to keep cows off of the tracks.
Right.
And so this car is coming towards him. So he jumps off of his train and does a switch on the road. So now the train is going on its own.
Right.
He's put a switch into the tracks to get the car off on the other side so his train could pass it. But then by the time he gets there, the car's still in front of him.
Yeah.
So we're jumping on and off of moving trains while filming it. It's just amazing to watch. Now the bad guys are throwing big railroad ties in the middle of the track. What's about to happen might not look really dangerous, but it is really dangerous. He goes down again on the front of that cow cutter. I know it has a different name, and I'll remember it at some point. And he sees that big wooden railroad tie coming towards him. And as he's coming towards it, he runs off of the train, down through the tracks, grabs the railroad tie, picks it up, and as this is happening, the train is coming up closer and closer and closer, and finally swoops right under his butt and lifts him up. Couple things. So if the train actually hits that railroad tie, the train could derail.
Yeah.
I mean, it would knock this huge, 10,000 ton, whatever it is, vehicle off the tracks. Yeah. If it hits him, hits his ankle, hits anything else the wrong way, cut his foot off, break his leg, break his back.
Or catch him underneath and he gets...
Or catch him underneath. It is, and he's not looking. So just, and it, again, just like that thing on the crossbeam between the wheels, he is smooth as silk and totally still when this happens.
Right. At least in the take we got in the movie.
Yep. Yeah, exactly. Well, that's what we wonder about. And the bad guys are throwing more wood down on that track.
Right.
And now he's holding that one big railroad tie, and the other railroad tie is sticking into the tracks. And as we come up to it, he throws his tie down on the corner of the other one and flips it off the track.
The timing of that, I was going insane watching that because the timing of it and the way it worked out, I don't know how, once again, I hate to keep saying this over and over again, but I don't know how many takes
I know.
The timing of that would take. And for it to flip in the right way, out of the way, blah, blah, blah. You know, he risked a lot because, once again, Steve, if he misses that tie and the tie stays in, who knows when it's called a cow catcher, by the way.
Cow catcher.
Yeah,
thank you.
Close enough. Cow catcher hits that thing. It could derail, like you said, or it could shoot him flying on steel or
come back and hit him in the head.
I mean, like things.
It's so well, and what's so and this is the thing about Buster Keaton is that it's not showy.
No.
There's not. You don't sit there. He's not making you go, "Oh my God, that's amazing."
Yeah.
It almost looks like, "Oh, he did that."
Right.
You know.
Right.
And what we'll see throughout this movie. This isn't a movie with a deep or complicated story. This isn't a movie with important themes or complex characters or anything like that. What it is here's a problem. How is Buster going to get out of this situation?
Right.
Here's another problem. How is he going to do it? And he's always going to do it in an inventive and funny way. And they're always going to be another little bit.
Yeah.
And just the craftsmanship of everything he does is so impressive. The bad guys have pulled Annabelle out onto the engine now. They pulled a switch to send him on the wrong track, and of course he stops just in time. He runs the train backwards, gets on the right track.
It's almost like a car. He almost does it like a car.
Totally.
Backing it up and then bringing it the other way.
And then he's trying to go the other way, and the wheels start spinning.
Yeah.
And so he has to put dirt on the tracks to get some traction, and he does it, and the train starts to go, but he's turned around to get the next pile of dirt. He doesn't have a train anymore. No. Now he's got to catch the train. And, of course, he jumps onto a moving train, just as you do.
Yeah.
And now the bad guys have sent back another car, and this one is on fire, which he finds rams into in the tunnel, pushes that off another direction. And he goes onto the back of the train, and I guess it's like, I don't know what it is, some big pipe or something that he sits into and almost falls into it. Again, it's another little bit. And now we go through the Confederate Army, which is retreating. And in a minute, we're going to go through the Union Army.
Which is advancing.
And he's, of course, chopping wood to try to fill up his to stoke his fire, breaks his axe. And then as he's working on the wood, there's the Northern Army. And what we should say is throughout this whole thing, we're hearing music. And when we see the Confederate Army, we're hearing Dixie. And when Johnny comes marching home, and when we see the Union Army, we hear it literally is the music out of the Ken Burns' Civil War documentary. I heard it multiple times. Mm-hmm. It's something we should point out about this music. Yeah, it's right out of the Civil War documentary. Yeah. Is that when in early silent films, there would be music played, but it was really whatever that person wanted to play at the time. They would just improvise. As silent films became bigger and became more artistic, they actually composed a score for that movie. In fact, there are multiple scores for this film, and you can watch it with different music, and different music totally changes the way you feel about some of the moments in the film.
Yeah.
And what's really interesting is that if you were to see this film in 1928 in a big movie house in Chicago or Los Angeles or New York, you would see it with a full orchestra playing. Yeah. If you were to see it in a small town in the middle of Arkansas, there'd be a guy with an organ. You know?
Oh, yeah.
And that guy and those people, that guy with the organ, he was a really important person in the community because he had to give life to the movie. Yeah. And sometimes that guy would do the score that he was given, and sometimes he'd go, I know better, and he would do his own thing. Yeah. And there was no way to control what music you were hearing when you watched this film. And the bad guys now are celebrating. They're taking off their Confederate clothes. They're getting their Union clothes on. We've made it back over the Union lines. And Buster Keaton still hasn't seen that he's surrounded by Union soldiers. And then he sees them.
Yeah.
And again, it's that stone face reaction.
Yeah. The eyes open, looking left to right.
Great shot of the first train. The general comes under this huge railroad bridge.
Yeah.
And then goes around and ends up on top of the huge railroad bridge, just as Buster Keaton comes under the huge railroad bridge, and they throw down More railroad ties on him, which doesn't really bother him at all.
Nope.
He gets out of the car. There's a little gag with the coat and hat. He gets into the woods and it starts to rain.
Yeah.
And it really rained.
Oh, it did?
No. I'm saying it's in the movie.
Yeah. Cold and hungry.
Yeah.
Really hungry.
Helplessly lost, hopelessly cold, and horribly hungry.
Horribly hungry.
That is a lot of alliteration. What's that
From
line?
Anxious Anchors.
Thank you. I knew you would have it.
That line will never leave my mind.
And we see now he goes through in the pouring rain a window into a house, and he sees a set table, and there's people there.
Yeah.
He grabs some food. He hides under the table, and who should show up but the entire staff of the Union Army who are now making their plans for the next day.
Yeah.
And one of the officers there is his dad. That's Joseph Keaton, who used to throw his son into the orchestra pit as one of the officers.
That's great.
Again, the little bits are so great that he's under there, their feet. We see him listening to what's happening as they describe their plans. We see a guy who's smoking a cigar, and that guy burns a hole in the tablecloth. Yeah. And now he can see through, and it burns him. And he has to be quiet. And now who do we see brought in from the rain but Annabelle, framed perfectly in the hole that the cigar burnt in the tablecloth. And the lighting is great. Again, there are no light meters at this time. People had the ability to just look and go, oh, I think this is about this stop. And to light the difference between just lighting his face or just his eye underneath that table is really impressive to get all of that just right. And they put Annabelle into a room, lock her up, and the plan that we hear is that, well, now that we got this train, we're going to go down with our supply trains, and we're going to meet up with the army, and we're going to surprise the Confederates on the left flank, and we're going to wipe them out. Yeah. So this is bad if you're a Confederate.
If you're a Confederate, right.
She's alone in her room, and he finally comes out from under that table with a piece of wood, which he then uses to knock a guard out, gets his clothes, goes up to another guard on patrol, knocks him out, climbs into the window where Annabelle is. She's asleep, can't figure out how to wake her up, puts his hand over her face, freaks out, realizes it's him. He says, please be really quiet, with hand gestures that I'm doing right now on our radio podcast.
That's right.
And then immediately knocks over a table.
Yes, he does. with his butt.
Yeah. And then little bits of comedy as they try to get out the window, hands slam to the window, they fall. Everything is going to have a little bit. And we get out into the pouring rain. We see some animated lightning. And then in the next lightning light up, what do we see? A bear.
A bear, yeah. Of course.
Because, again, it's out of the frying pan into the fire.
Totally. And bears just wander around in lightning in the rain, totally.
I wonder how many bears there were in Georgia I have no idea.
I don't know.
I didn't
study that.
By the way, I believe this is named Barney the Bear.
Oh.
And this was the bear. Like, if you wanted a bear in your movie in the 1920s, this was the bear to get.
What?
He's the bear that's in Gold Rush with Charlie Chaplin.
The same bear?
Same bear. Look, there are not a lot of trained bears.
It is a cottage industry, man.
It is.
All right.
Well, it still is today.
Yeah.
Like, there was the bear that was the Ben or something that was like in a 60s TV show. And that bear was in every time you saw a $6 Million Man, it was the same bear. Wow. Yeah. So maybe we picked the wrong careers.
I don't know.
And unfortunately, she steps into a bear trap.
No, what? As if she hasn't endured enough.
Well, my understanding of bear traps is that'll break your ankle.
Yes, it will.
Maybe rip your foot off.
Yep. You'll bleed out from it too.
Yeah.
After a few days.
But we're going to immediately go from pain to comedy because as he gets her out of the bear trap, his hands get stuck in the bear trap. And then in trying to get his hands out of the bear trap, his foot gets stuck in the bear trap.
I think Bugs Bunny did this.
I think so too. And they finally are free, and then they kind of say, well, let's just stay here, and thank you for rescuing me, and you're very brave. And it's the next morning, and they wake up, and the army is loading up the trains because they're getting ready to go south.
Yep.
And he goes like, well, we got to do something. We got to find a way to stop this. So he runs up to the train because he's dressed as a Union soldier, grabs a big sack. We're like, what's he doing?
Right.
Opens up the sack. It's filled with shoes. And then he goes, I'm going to put you in the sack. She's not that into the idea.
Yeah, well, who would be?
And he's fairly rough in getting her into the sack and explaining his plan.
By the way, this actress, she goes on, I forget her name, Mac. But anyway, she married a producer of the film, but she becomes a writer and producer and maker of these silent films, and then kind of fell out of favor with it. But then years later, went on the circuit, like doing many tours and speeches about working with Buster Keaton on The General. And she has her own pretty incredible life story herself as a performer in silent film.
Well, one thing I saw about her, I didn't see all that,
Yeah.
was that when Keaton's life pretty much fell apart, which it did pretty soon after this,
Yeah.
she got him work.
Yeah.
When no one would hire him,
Yep.
she got him work.
Yeah.
So he gets her in the bag, he picks her up, he marches up with all the other soldiers with bags, and he throws her in. Yeah. No, well, first he walks past where he's supposed to take it.
Right.
And one of the officers is pointing out, like, no, you got to go over here. And as he's doing it, we see from the other side of the train that she is pulling out the pin that connects the freight cars from the engine.
Yes.
Then he just throws her in one of the cars. And then as he turns away, we see a giant box and barrels and all the stuff that is going to pile right on top of
and
her.
he's like, ugh.
Yeah, but nothing he can do.
Nope.
He jumps up on that train with a piece of wood, takes out 3 dudes right away.
He's an action star.
The sidekick he throws at the one guy to kick him off the train, that's a damn good kick.
This is an action star in nowadays, right? This would totally be an action star.
100%.
Action movie. This is an action movie. The General is an action movie.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
It is. It's nonstop action.
Yes.
Beginning to end. Yeah. It's funny. I'm glad you said that because we've said a thing, as we've charted how did the modern action movie get made, and we talked about movies like Jaws, like Raiders of the Lost Ark, like Die Hard, Star Wars, Empire Strikes Back, and going like this is really where it starts. We're wrong.
Yeah.
Yeah. Because this is an nonstop action film, beginning to end, right here.
Someone to save.
Yep.
He's got a cause he's fighting. He's the underdog.
Obstacles keep getting in his way. Yep. He has to fight back from them.
And a little bit of luck.
A lot, yeah. And the bad guy he takes off in the engine. Bad guys see what's happening. Oh, and by the way, one of the 3 dudes he takes out is actually the general, the main general of the Union Army, and he is left unconscious in the engine.
For a majority of the movie.
For the rest,
of the movie is just about. Yeah.
And they go, oh, we gotta go after this train, and they get all the soldiers. Like all the soldiers get onto a train too. Yep. And now, so we have 3 engines going. We have the General, his engine, which he has now stolen back.
Yeah.
We have the Texan, which the spy bad guys are on. And we have another engine, which is connected to the huge train of supplies with all the Army guys also coming along.
Right.
And as his train is going, Buster jumps off the train, ties some ropes around some telegraph wires, which he pulls down, and we see that it actually knocks out the telegraph line. So the Confederacy they're winning, John.
Yeah, they're winning. And the same bit is repeated with this whole and then checking the equipment, seeing that they can't when they cut the wires for the Confederacy. So,
he basically cuts a hole into the freight car to look for the girl who he walks around. I think he steps on her like 3 times before he actually finds her. Finds her. She still has that pin that she pulled. They climb out of the car with her on top of him. It's very awkward and very funny. Lots of petticoats in his face. And the bad guy train is coming up fast, and he's running out of firewood.
Yeah.
So they stop the train. There's a nice rail fence there. He takes a rail, throws it beautifully on top of the train.
Yep.
Throws another rail up, not so beautifully, hits the first rail, knocks it down.
Yeah.
Then he goes, I guess I had to throw it farther. He throws it over the train. And this is all one shot.
Yeah.
This whole bit of him not quite getting the rails into the train are all one shot. And then we also have her doing something with a rope behind the train. We don't know what it is. Finally, we get going again. And as they get going, the bad guys run into the rope that she had set up, which pulls 2 trees into their engine and messes them up. So Annabelle made a good move.
Yep.
By the way, her name is Annabelle Lee, which is the Edgar Allan Poe poem.
Oh.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Lee also makes sense as a Confederate thing.
100% does.
Right.
Smart guy, that Buster Keaton. He knocks out the whole back wall of the freight car, which creates a beautiful shot of the train coming up behind them. He starts throwing stuff at them, barrels and crates, and to get in their way, which they have to, at each one, they have to stop and get it off the tracks. And then he throws another one, and they have to stop and get it off the tracks.
I love this situation because the idea of them having to stop the train, get out and move it, and the frustration to get back in, and then, shit, we got to do it again. But it's funny. It's great beats. Great comedic beats.
So I watched this with my 8-year-old son.
Yeah.
which is great. I love when I have a Cine-Files movie that is totally appropriate for him.
Yeah.
First of all, he loved it.
Good.
Not only did he love it, he was 100% in from the beginning, and he was talking to the movie. He kept going like, oh, no, they see him. Oh, no, he doesn't know that there's the army there. Oh, no, he's there. And when we got to this where he's throwing the barrels and stuff onto the tracks, Jack says, wow, he's really good at this, which he is, by the way. Yeah. Every time he throws something, the accuracy and just the skill with which he does all the things he does is really amazing. That unconscious officer starts to wake up. And Annabelle, who's kind of driving the train at this moment, doesn't even notice. But don't worry, Buster's going to come up and knock him out again. Yeah. They stop at a water tower because trains need water. And we have another bit where the big pipe for the water comes off. And so he starts it, and it just knocks her down. It looks, by the way, that looks painful.
Yeah.
And they leave the water on, and now the bad guys go through the water. So it is the exact opposite of what happened on the way going north. Now happens to the bad guys on the way going south. Right. There's a little bit where she finds a piece of wood with a hole in it, throws it away. That's not a good piece of wood.
It doesn't work for us.
And then she starts sweeping up. So there's some weird bits in here.
Yeah, true. Conventional at the time, I imagine.
Yeah.
For a character, a female character, yeah.
The trains are coming up fast. The bad guys are out on that cow catcher. They are almost to that freight car behind his train, and they're going to jump on it and climb over, but he's cut off that car, and now they keep going.
Right.
Yeah. They open fire with their rifles, and unfortunately, the car is slowing them down, and they push that car off onto another track, and they back up to go back on their first track and slam into the train with the officers and the supplies and knock them down. Right. Those officers are going to get knocked down a bunch of times. Back on our train, Buster teaches her how to run the train because he's going to jump off, which he does, and destroy the next switch.
Right.
She starts the train going, and he goes, oh, this is great. I've got the switch destroyed, and he looks around and, uh-oh. She's gone because she can't stop the train. Now he runs after it, can't catch it. Now it's going downhill fast. So he runs down like a cliff to catch up to her, which again is Jackie Chan does an homage to running down this thing in Police Story or Police Force, whatever name you go to. So he runs down the train, just gets down to her lower when she's coming around the track, and that's when she figures out how to go in reverse. And she goes away, and he has to go back up. And they are coming backwards, and just as they're coming backwards, the bad guys have gone on the switch that Buster thrown and go up this ramp right next to him, and then the train behind him slams into the train, almost knocking them off this ramp.
Yeah.
And that was done in reverse. If you look at the smoke is going down when those trains collide. So what they actually did was the trains were together, and they pulled apart, which then they put in reverse to make it look like a crash. That is basic film trickery.
Movie magic.
Yeah. Back to our train. He's climbed around the front of the train now, and he's pulled that oil lantern out of the light of the train. Right. And they come to the Rock River Bridge, which is where the big rendezvous between the main Union Army and the supply train was supposed to happen. And they stop in the middle of the bridge. And they start building something in the middle of the bridge, a big pile of stuff. And we're going like, what is going on here? The bad guys are stuck at that switch that Buster Keaton broke. They can't get past it. And then we figure out what they're building in the middle of the bridge. They're building a big fire.
Fire.
And he takes that lantern and he pours all the oil or kerosene or whatever it was at the time on the big fire. And he steps over to the other side, pouring oil everywhere. And she's got something that's lit on fire, and she drops it.
I know.
And there is a big fire in the middle of the bridge between Buster Keaton and the train.
Yeah.
He can't get past it. And again, we have to point out there's nothing fake here.
Yeah.
This is a really big fire on a wooden bridge with Buster Keaton who's trying to get past it. And he basically jumps over it and jumps right through the bridge and ends up down in the river below. Yeah. It's a great bit. Bad guys still can't get past that switch. We're driving along. A Confederate guy sees them. Well, Buster Keaton's wearing a Union uniform, and the guy opens fires. And Buster goes, I should change my outfit.
Yeah.
And they pull into town, and he tells everybody, and there's the Confederate Army there. There's the Confederate general there, and they rally the troops. We hear a triumphant version of Dixie as they everyone's coming out of their houses. And this is where you see, this is a big movie.
Yeah.
There are a lot of people and horses and cannon, and a whole big battle is about to happen as the whole army is going marching down the streets, and Annabelle's helping to do all this stuff. And we see Dad and we see the brother, who are now seeing Johnny Gray in a different light. And as we march down the street, I have something interesting to tell you about this town.
Please.
This was shot in Cottage Grove, Oregon.
Okay.
And this is the main street of a small town, Cottage Grove, Oregon. Would you like to know what other film was shot on this street?
The Shining.
No.
Okay.
Animal House. The final sequence, and that is Cottage Grove.
The parade?
In the parade. And I think my understanding is that's the same street.
That's perfect.
Because it's the main street of the town.
That would make sense.
Isn't that amazing?
Yeah. No matter what weird films you make about college, they still respect the Cine-Files, the original directors. Yeah.
Yeah. And suddenly he's all alone in this city street, and he's like, "Oh, I got to go catch up to the guys."
Right.
The bridge is now fully burning. The bad guys finally fix that rail, and they get past it. The cavalry has arrived at the bridge, and they say, "You know what? Take that train across the bridge." They take that train across the bridge. The bridge collapses with the train on it. Again,
Real?
all real.
Not
400 people from the town came out, picnics, everything, to watch the bridge collapse. It's not only is it a real bridge with a real Civil War era train collapsing, 100 feet into the river below, it was there for 20 years.
Oh, wow.
It was like a local landmark for 20 years. And it wasn't until World War II where they finally they sold the engine for scrap metal.
Wow. It was in the water.
In the water,
for 20
sitting
years.
there for 20
Wow.
years. Yeah. Isn't that crazy?
Yeah.
Yeah. This movie, that shot, this is what I understand is, that shot cost $42,000. It is one of the most expensive single shots up to that point in film history.
Yeah.
Isn't that crazy?
That's madness. I thought I read that it was the most expensive shot ever in a silent film, certainly.
It might be.
And possibly in the top 3 most expensive shot ever made when you adjust for inflation.
Yeah. It's a huge – well, and this is the thing to think about. This is a comedy.
Yeah.
How much money do we spend on a comedy today?
It ain't that.
It's like they went, Buster Keaton's a huge star. Great. Go to have armies and soldiers and horses and cannon and destroy bridges and trains for your comedy. Have fun. And here comes the army, and they're going to ford across the river here, and there's the Confederate army on the ridge across the way, and they open fire. Yep. And Buster is with the general, and he's gotten a sword. He has some problems with that sword. Because every time he moves it, the sword is coming off the hilt, and then he's dropping it. He pokes another officer with the sword. There's a lot of explosions everywhere. He's trying to relay orders for the general. Oh, he loses his sword again. He runs over to where some cannons are. He walks right in front of a cannon just after or just before it fires. Wow. And again, that's gunpowder. Yep. Like if the timing is wrong, it'll kill him. Mm-hmm. There's no question that would kill him. We see that the bad guys are down the hill, including our spy master, the main sort of bad guy, and he's got a rifle. And Buster is kind of directing some of the cannon guys, the gunners, to fire, and one guy goes down. Yeah. We see the bad guy, with his rifle again, and another gunner goes down. And then Buster points at that guy with his sword, except the sword flies off the hilt and kills the guy. So he accidentally taken out one guy. He's going to fire that cannon, except he accidentally fires the cannon straight up. Yeah. And we see that more bad guys are coming through the river, and he suddenly goes, "Where's that cannonball going to come down?" He backs slowly away, but where does it come down? Into a dam, and the river floods, and it wipes out the rest of the Union troops. So Johnny Gray has essentially single-handedly won this battle. Well, not single-handedly.
Single-handedly.
He is the hero of this battle.
He got lucky.
Yeah. There's even a moment where the flag bearer gets hit, and he grabs the flag in an extremely dramatic, probably my guess is right out of Birth of a Nation kind of shot, of him carrying that flag. Yeah. And we hear Dixie, and the heroes return to town. And the town is cheering, and Buster makes it to the train. He gets up on the engines, and now our Union general, who's been unconscious for most of the film, wakes up, and Buster Keaton captures him. Yep. Marches him right over to the Confederate general. He surrenders his sword, And Buster's kind of looking at that sword. And the Confederate general looks over at Johnny Gray and says, "Is that your uniform?" He goes, "No, I had to wear it to get across enemy lines." And the general, seeming kind of angry, says, "Take it off."
Yeah.
And now he's feeling very sheepish, takes off the uniform. Annabelle is watching. Annabelle's dad is watching. The brother is watching. This is not how he wanted this to go. Yeah. And then the general hands him another coat. And he goes, "Okay." And he puts on the coat. And we, of course, know what's happening.
Right.
We know that's an officer's coat. And then he hands him a hat. And we know what's happening. We know that's an officer's hat.
Right.
And it takes a long time for him to figure it out. Yeah. And they hand him a sword. And now suddenly he looks at his clothes and his sword, and the general says, "Enlist the lieutenant." And he finally gets to be in the army.
Yeah.
And he takes Annabelle, and he goes over, and they sit on the train. And
this is a great sequence.
He wants to have his first kiss with her.
Yeah.
And just as they're about to have a first kiss, an enlisted man walks up and salutes.
Yep.
So he has to salute back. And then he's about to have his first kiss. Another enlisted man shows up, and he has to salute back. And then another. And then he's about to have first kiss, and then there's revelry.
Yeah.
And the entire army starts to come up. And finally, he switches position, grabs her, plants a big kiss on her while lifting his arm up and down as quickly as possible. And that is the end of The General.
Ah. Fantastic stuff.
It is such a entertaining and engaging.
Yeah.
I didn't, sometimes you have this is a really old film.
Right.
And I'm going to appreciate it for what I'm going to appreciate it for. Right. I don't feel that way at all with this movie.
No, this is a fun watch, Steve. Totally. When you first suggested, Metropolis was a damn slog to get through.
It's a slog. It's brilliant, but it's hard.
2 hours and 20 or 40 minutes, whatever it is.
Depending on the version.
Yeah, for an independent film, or for a silent film rather, is madness. We did it for the Thunderdome for the top 10. It was the Thunderdome. We almost quit doing it after doing that because that movie is tedious. This is not that. This is so much fun. Buster Keaton is great. The shots are the camera is well placed for the shots that he's doing. The action is believable. The near misses, the switches in power in the action, like who's ahead, who's in charge, who's not in charge. All of it so completely works. And the reasons for why he's doing what he's doing make sense as well, and turn him into a sweetheart of a protagonist in the film because he's doing this to look good for his girlfriend and to earn her respect for him and honor. And, we can't judge that. In the South or in that time, maybe this is a common mentality. Like serving the South is a way of like being seen as a heroic person to your family or to your wife or to potential wife. That kind of stuff.
I mean, you can't separate ideas of honor and ideas of romantic heroism and ideas which are always connected to getting the girl and the cheers of the people from the reasons that people enlist in the military and fight wars at the beginning of the wars.
Right, at the beginning of the wars.
The Civil War in particular was thought of as going to be very romantic. It wasn't.
No. You mentioned people coming out to see the bridge collapse. We saw that in the Civil War documentary. People coming out to watch the first battle with their picnic chairs and their carriages and thinking, and then they're like, "Oh my God, this is like going on forever. This is real."
Well, this is again. I'm not trying to get deep about this movie at all, but like it is interesting. Here is the most cataclysmic event in American history, and here's a comedy about it that's supposed to be fun.
Right.
And that really is the problem because the reception of this movie didn't do well.
It did not.
No, it got mixed reviews. This is right at the moment that sound hits. So suddenly people are not wanting to. This movie seems old-fashioned. Maybe people weren't digging the fact that it was a comedy about the Civil War or that the heroes were in the Confederacy. It was a huge budget. It lost money. United Artists, who he made the film for, dumped him. After this film, he never had full artistic control of a movie again. He went to MGM where it sounds like they treated him absolutely terribly. He had a lot of trouble adjusting the sound era. This is also when he had a terrible divorce and he became, pretty raging alcoholic. MGM forced him to use a stunt double. Can you believe that?
Yeah.
Like this is the most beautiful, graceful, moving human who has built his entire life on going through these death-defying events and being safe. And they go, no, we're going to have somebody else do that. Like that's insane to me. His last movie for MGM, he teams up with Jimmy Durante for supposed to be just a horrendously awful movie. Yeah. It was horrible for him. He's done as an American movie star. And then he goes back to two-reelers in the 30s. Which aren't very popular. Yeah. He ends up as a gag writer which means he's just writing jokes.
Yep.
So he's writing jokes for the Marx Brothers, and not the good Marx Brothers movies, like some of the later, not so good Marx Brothers movies. He's just doing anything he can to make a buck. So here's a guy, he's lost all his money, one of the biggest stars in the world for a certain period of time, made these amazing films, and now he's like, a working writer, actor guy desperately trying to just get a gig to pay rent.
Yeah.
Isn't that just amazing?
That's the business out in this world, in Hollywood. You know, you can fall down at any time, and then you end up, and it's a public falling. That's the thing that's the worst about it. You can hit the highest of highs, but if you don't maintain it or come close to maintaining that level, the tumble back down is a rough tumble, man.
It's just so strange to me. Like, here's a guy who's clearly a genius.
Yeah.
And you go, okay, maybe we don't give you $750,000. Maybe we give you $150,000.
Right.
But let him do his thing rather than, like, have him make a crappy movie with Jimmy Durante. No respect to Mr. Durante.
Right. Well, look, everybody does crappy movies back then who were great, but...
And today.
Yeah, and the thing is you compare this with Marion Mack, and I was bringing this up earlier, and I want to make sure I get this right. She was originally a Mack Sennett bathing girl. Then she didn't earn her first credit until 1938, and she says because she insisted on it, she married the movie's producer, Louis Llewellyn, in 1924. That was this movie she did, Mary of the Movies. She heard of the part in The General from her hairdresser, shot the thing for 6 months, said it was an arduous shoot, then decided afterwards that she would quit acting after this film rather than endure such a thing again, and a long separation from her husband again. For her, the priorities were about being with her husband and being in love and pursuing that. She becomes a screenwriter, and then she is a producer. They start a production company, and they do all kinds of films. And then, as I said, eventually, after Lewis's death or her husband's death in 1969, interest in The General's revived, and she goes around and tours extensively talking about Keaton and everything, working with him.
Wow.
But look, she had another avenue to pursue.
Yeah.
I think maybe with Buster, because he only did those 1 days of school, he had no education to fall back on. This is all he knew.
Well, and if you're the star, used to having total creative control of your thing, and now you got to work at gig jobs to make a buck, how are you going to do that?
Exactly. Where are you going to go?
I'm used to being able to get trains to destroy bridges.
Right.
I mean, like, you think about some of his most famous stunts, like the house falling on him and he's standing in the wind.
Yeah.
By the way, those of you who haven't done the Buster Keaton thing, this is what YouTube is great for. Go on YouTube, do a search for Buster Keaton, watch some stuff.
Yeah, you don't have to watch the full movies.
Yeah.
Watch just the sequences of the gags that he pulled off. They're incredible. The timing, everything, precision, phenomenal.
One of the most amazing things I've ever seen in my entire life is a moment where there's a speeding car going by and he reaches out his hand and grabs it and gets pulled off by it.
Yes.
And I look at that thing, it's like, I don't understand how your arm's not ripped off your body.
Right.
It is one of the most amazing stunts I've ever seen in my life. But at this point, he's not getting work. It's not until TV. When TV comes along and there starts to be, watching the late movie of watching some silent films. And some of the great comedians like Red Skelton, like Lucille Ball were huge fans of his, and they brought him back.
Yep.
And he started to make appearances. And he's at 50 and 60 doing some of the stunts on television that he had made famous 30, 40 years earlier. And someone asked him, like, well, how do you do all those things and not get hurt? And he lifts up his shirt and he's just covered in bruises.
Yeah.
And, because the reality is, as much as he might have been the little boy who can't be hurt, this stuff hurts.
Yeah.
He's going to get hurt and got hurt a lot. He they gave him an honorary Oscar in 1959. And then his last two films are It's a Mad, Mad, Mad World, which I know is one of your all-time favorites.
It is.
And then he's in A Funny Thing Happens the Way of the Form. He passes away in 1966. Orson Welles called The General the highest achievement in comedy and perhaps the greatest film ever made. So that's Orson Welles. And this, he was, we talk about in this podcast the influence these films have on us today. Well, in addition to people like Salvador Dali, who thought that Buster Keaton is one of the greatest artists of all time, if you look at Mel Brooks, Jackie Chan, if you look at Woody Allen, if you look at so much comedy where those people love Buster Keaton. So if you want to know where the great comedians you love got their stuff from, well, this is one of the origins. Buster Keaton, one of the great classic comedians of all time.
You mentioned one. You didn't mention one for Sunset Boulevard. He has.
He's in Sunset Boulevard.
He has a role in Sunset when they're all playing poker, which is like a real meta moment of all these failed actors or or actors who were once famous
Yeah.
at one point are all together, like talking bitterly about the industry as they play poker. And you're just like, well, this is an interesting meta moment in Sunset Boulevard, which is obviously about Nora Desmond losing her spot at the title. Yeah, there you go.
Well, do you have final thoughts?
Yeah, here's my final thoughts. It's not all about what's going on nowadays. It's not all about what went on in the 70s or the 60s or the 50s. To be a cinephile, you have to understand the origins of film, and you have to be willing to go back and watch the pioneers of this medium and what they were able to do and how they thrilled audiences and the time that they took and the precision and the intelligence and the work that they put in and the hours that they put in to make these incredible films that influence, as Steve said, so many people nowadays, so many great comedians, martial artists, what have you. Nowadays, you have to go back and appreciate what happened in the past so you can really appreciate where we're at now presently and where we're going in the future with movies, because I'd love to see this kind of thing come back nowadays. It's rare. You rarely get these kinds of action comedies like this, right, where it's one person and it's timing and all these other things are happening and they're barely escaping and barely doing all this. It's rare when it happens nowadays, but I feel like there could be a nice niche of that kind of action movie cinema brought back with the right person in charge of it.
I like everything you said, and the thing that it made me think of is we talk a lot about art, you know, in our podcast.
Yes.
And we really elevate artists, like the idea of great art.
Yeah, sure.
And I personally am such a proponent of craft. Is that, and if you watch this film, you have to think about, or you should think about, the craftsmanship.
Yeah.
How did they do it? First, you have the idea, and then you need to bring together all sorts of technology that's from 1860s.
Yeah.
You in timing and cameras and film stock and lenses and we had all of these pieces working together to make a tiny little moment just a little bit better.
Yeah.
You know, it's not actually the big stuff that make this movie work. It's all the little stuff and all the little stuff that he was incredibly disciplined about making happen just perfectly.
Yeah.
You know, and that's what makes it such a fun film. Yeah. And we don't think about, you know, perfectionism when it comes to comedy. But in fact, a lot of comedy is about perfectionism. It's about getting it exactly right so you can get that laugh. Mm-hmm. So that's what we think of The General. We would love to hear what you think. And we'd love to hear if this is your first silent film or your first Buster Keaton film, what's the experience like looking at a movie that's almost 100 years old? Does it still work for you as a film, or is it just too hard to get past that barrier of no dialogue and title cards and stuff like that? If we love to hear your thoughts, visit us on Facebook. You can leave reviews on iTunes, where of course you should subscribe to the show. And if you can't subscribe there, do it on Spotify or Stitcher. Maybe you want to go to YouTube and look at a still image, not our moving faces, but it's still a lot of fun. And the best thing about YouTube, you could leave your reviews there. And if you really love the show, well, the best thing to do is support us on Patreon at patreon.com/the Cine-Files, where you can suggest films that we do here or listen to our Cine-Files shorts. And of course, if you want to buy The General or stream it or stream through Amazon Prime, anything we've ever done, or if you want to buy, let's say, a $3,000 TV, you should do it through Cine-Files.net. The price is the same to you, but it helps support the show.
Yeah.
And that's, I think, it for this week. Oh, I should say how you can reach me on Twitter at SRMorris or on Instagram on SRMorris1. John, how about you?
You can always reach me at The Roca Says on Twitter and on Instagram. And yeah, like Steve said, let us know what you thought if you haven't seen The General before, what your experience was like watching it for the first time.
And that's it for this week. We'll see you next time on the Cine-Files.